Ilia Topuria, the UFC champion who's been knocking out legends like Alexander Volkanovski, Charles Oliveira, and Max Holloway, handing the latter his first ever KO loss. With devastating power in his hands, it's easy to label him as one of the division's deadliest strikers. But what if I told you that's only half the story for the country of Georgia's first jiu-jitsu black belt? Beneath his highlight reel knockouts lies a world-class grappler who's been choking out opponents since day one, recording 7 straight pro MMA submission finishes before he ever scored a knockout. Even more impressive is that 6 of those submission finishes were secured in the very first round of the fight, with 1 coming in the second. In this video, we'll do a technical breakdown of Ilia Topuria's grappling in 4 different principles: submissions, takedowns, top control, and finally his defense and escape ability. We've analyzed all 17 of his pro bouts and have managed to get a pretty good picture of the champ's grappling ability. Alright, let's dive into the first facet of Ilia Topuria's grappling, his submission game. I want to specifically highlight a few areas: his willingness to chase the submission finish, his technical proficiency and the submission skills he has in his toolbox, and his ability to chain multiple submission-based attacks together. Early in his professional career, Ilia's fighting style was marked by his aggressive grappling, with his first 4 fights following more or less the same progression: double leg takedown, take the back, attack the rear naked choke. Although some of these ultimately resulted in Ilia earning a different submission finish. With the first 3 of these regional finishes being in Spain, followed by the next one in Colombia, it's tough to say if we can attribute this all to Ilia's technical prowess or a relatively low level of grappling awareness on his opponent's behalf. What we do know is that his relentless pursuit of submission attacks points to him having a high level of confidence in his ability to finish there. Nobody finds the back in all of their fights by mistake. In Ilia's training, we can see that he dedicates a significant portion of practice time to submission grappling, even more than his striking, based on what he posts. Ilia's weapons of choice appear to be a standard rear naked choke, a guillotine chain of attacks that he can transition into darce or more often anaconda, as well as triangles and arm bars. His most recent submission finish before he started starching everyone was an arm triangle against Bryce Mitchell. Ilia has a dangerous guillotine choke, and the first time we got to see it on display was in his 4th professional fight, which happened to be the first fight where Ilia faced any real adversity, finding himself on bottom under threat multiple times himself. You'll notice a few things about this guillotine. Ilia doesn't make the novice mistake of sitting and trying to pull his opponent on top of him. He instead brings his lower body to his opponent's hip line to form a connection. He is also actively using his bottom leg to prevent his opponent from circling out or passing, at the same time hooking on to his opponent's leg to maintain the connection. His top leg also forms a connection to the opponent's far hip, which would keep him attached so he could follow into mount if he were to attempt to roll out this way, which is a pretty standard guillotine defense. He is also contracting inward, which brings the opponent's chin tighter to his chest, thus tightening the choke, instead of trying to extend and pull his head off, which counterintuitively gives the other fighter more room to breathe and escape. He had another beautiful guillotine choke in his 5th professional bout in Finland. Something to add, this was after nearly a 2-year hiatus, with Ilia returning as a black belt and finally looking like a true top-level featherweight in terms of physicality. He also showcased striking at a level that we're used to seeing now, but that is someone else's area of expertise. You'll notice that when he attacks the guillotine, once again he directly attaches his lower body to his opponent. He doesn't sit and attempt to pull his opponent into the guillotine, which would give them time to circle out or jump to the safe side. His outside leg attaching to the back serves its intended purpose, keeping Ilia's hips attached as his opponent attempts to roll out, allowing him to transition to mount with the choke still on, switching from an arm in to standard guillotine, and arching his back to bring the opponent's chin to his chest, securing the finish. He attempted this same finish in his UFC debut against Youssef Zalal, when he was still being introduced as
a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner standing 5 feet 7 inches tall.
But he wasn't quite able to secure mount, so Youssef was able to free himself. Another tool in his arsenal is his anaconda choke. In his 6th professional fight, this one in Cage Warriors, while attacking his opponent's back, he gets too high and it appears he will lose the position, but not before putting his right arm in place to secure an anaconda choke while in motion. Anybody can lock up an anaconda, but what Ilia does demonstrates a high level of proficiency with this particular submission. With his opponent still in turtle, Ilia first locks up the choke and walks his hip towards his opponent's, where he then bridges. With his opponent's head posture collapsed, he rolls directly over to his back. Ilia then continuously walks towards his opponent's hips, further applying choking pressure, while the other fighter attempts to circle away. Before we know it, he's been rendered completely unconscious. We again see Ilia threaten this choke in his brave combat bout with Steven Gonsalves, his last fight before entering the UFC. He first first locks up the anaconda on his feet before sitting under Gonçalves' center of gravity. With his head tucked under Ilia's chest, it is easy for him to bridge and roll him over onto his back, where Ilia immediately walks towards his hips and is able to hook one of his legs. Now, for most people, this would be dead to rights, but Gonçalves also showcases some high-level jiu-jitsu, first using his hands to help him free his trapped leg so he can circle away from Ilia and relieve some of the tension in the choke. Next, he is able to use his elbow as a tool to open Ilia's supporting arm, allowing him to escape the submission attempt and become Ilia's first knockout finish. With 8 submission victories in professional MMA, it's obvious that Ilia has some high-level submission grappling. Between his wide range of attacks, ranging from inverted triangles to anaconda chokes, he definitely has the tools to put his opponents away on the ground. Although it seems that at the highest levels, he has had more trouble finding the sub, such as in his bout with Youssef Zalal, which became his first decision victory. Hey guys, if you liked the video so far, please consider subscribing to my channel and liking the video. I put a ton of effort into these so I can bring you accurate and helpful technical analysis on grappling within the sport of MMA. We have more great breakdowns already on the way. Now, Ilia Topuria started judo at just 4 years old, before transitioning into Greco-Roman wrestling and then jiu-jitsu. So his grappling is built on a strong foundation of takedown skills that we've got to see on display as recent as his bout with Max Holloway. Earlier in his professional fighting career, Ilia opened his fights by almost immediately shooting a double leg takedown. Similar to his early submission success, it's tough to say if his ability to take down his opponent was due to high-level wrestling skill or a lack of defensive ability from his opponents. It's notable that almost none of the people he double-legged in his first 4 fights exhibited any kind of competent takedown defense, with most of them doing the schoolyard, wrap around him and try to roll him over maneuver. But he did do some things well in terms of timing, driving his feet well, and finishing on the wall. In his Cage Warriors fight against Brian Boland, Ilia Topuria attempts to do a standard finish from the lock double on the cage, where you drive your opponents into the cage, which makes it so their legs are carrying less weight and you're able to effectively pull their base out from underneath them. Boland does something awkward here and just holds on to Ilia instead of conceding the takedown and trying to get back to his feet. So Ilia is able to secure a big lift with the double and take him back down, where he ultimately finishes him. We saw an evolution in his ability to time his takedowns in his bout with Youssef Zalal, where he catches a knee before seamlessly transitioning into a double leg, sitting in the corner to successfully take Zalal down. He's also demonstrated that he can execute takedowns under fire, or in the rare instance that he finds himself overwhelmed. In his fight with Gonçalves, following a head kick, Ilia was on the receiving end of a blitz of punches and slipped to the floor. He immediately rebounded with a perfect double leg with his head in the center line, and great footwork that allowed him to get the takedown and turn the tide. Again, this time in his lightweight bout against Jai Herbert, Ilia was sat down with a big head kick that could have potentially been fight-ending, but he instinctively fell back to his wrestling, grabbing a double, which Jai was able to counter with hip pressure. He then switched to a single leg takedown, wrestling up to his feet and attempting to use his outside foot to hook the elevated leg and drop Jai to that hip. When this failed, he switched his head to the outside again, locking a double and running Herbert to the wall. If you're an aspiring fighter or grappler, know this one thing: all of the power in a double leg comes from foot movement. After a decent amount of time spent vying for position on the wall, Ilia is able to secure a lock double, which I like to refer to as the top of the positional hierarchy in wall wrestling because of the control it gives you over your opponent's base. He then steps his foot under Jai's center of gravity to get a big lift and secure the takedown. While Ilia clearly has a high level of traditional wrestling attacks, he doesn't always get it perfect, as you can see in his Zalal fight, where he stops driving mid-takedown, allowing himself to be put in a front headlock, followed by then jumping back into guard. Fortunately for him, Zalal wasn't able to finish the guillotine choke. With that said, moments like this where Ilia perfectly executed a double leg halfway through the 5th round in a brutal slugfest with Josh Emmett point to him being a pretty well-rounded shoot boxer. He also showcased that he can pull out Greco-Roman style attacks when the conditions are right, like this big suplex from the Zalal fight. However, he's not nearly as effective at the Sambo style of sweeps and trips while against the wall as you see Khabib in Islam's camp, but we did see him get a big trip against Holloway with a body lock against the cage. Although he's a pretty solid wrestler, I don't see him being able to execute his offensive wrestling as well against the current top of the lightweight division as it stands now, with names like Arman Tsarukyan, Justin Gaethje, Gamrot, or Dariush Shivan. Fortunately for Ilia though, he throws some serious bombs that always seem to find the target. To get a full picture of Ilia's grappling skills, the next piece we need to look at is his top control or riding ability, how well he is able to keep someone on bottom once he's taken them down. Now, the big caveat on this is that with someone like Ilia Topuria's knockout power, it's often beneficial to stand his opponent up and try to get the finish on the feet. But we do have some insights from his fight career, including his recent appearances in the UFC, to see how he fares in this area. In his bout with Bryce Mitchell, he finds himself in a position that he's not too familiar with by this point in his career, where his opponent is the one trying to bring it to the ground. After being taken down by Bryce twice in the first round, Ilia manages to drop Bryce with a big right hand in the second. Ilia goes straight for a front headlock here, but rushes a bit and puts himself in a suboptimal position where Bryce is able to take a single leg against him. Nothing comes of this, but it could have theoretically allowed him the chance to wrestle up from here. Ilia spent some time attempting to pin Bryce from side control, but he probably would have been better off moving to some form of half guard or leg tuck, where he can effectively keep Bryce's lower body pinned as well, and not able to switch to his base and start to build back up. He makes what I would deem to be an error, trying to step directly into mount, which gives Bryce room to get his base back underneath him. It's possible that Ilia thought he could finish Bryce here, or he didn't care if he was able to get back to his feet or not. But if his goal was to keep him down, his focus would have been better spent harassing Bryce's feet with his own, as we see many people from the Dagestani Chechen camp do, as well as on trying to keep Bryce's weight on his hands. When you unlock your grip to strike someone from here, you're typically giving them a free path to their feet, which is why you see the best ground and pounders, guys like Khabib and Hamzat, first put their opponents in positions where them opening their hands to strike them won't allow their opponent to just waltz out. Positions like the Dagestani handcuffs or crucifix. Ilia went on to drop Bryce Mitchell again after this and finish him with an arm triangle, handing the then 15-0 Mitchell his first loss. Ilia showed some improvement in this area in his fight with Josh Emmett. Although this fight will be remembered by fans as a 5-round brawl on the feet, Ilia showcased some great grappling and top control. Following the double leg against Josh, Ilia did a much better job positionally. You can see him transition directly into a leg tuck, which is much better control on top than side control, because any path that the bottom fighter has to their feet involves first moving into turtle. So Josh would either need to turn away and use the wall to build up, or retract this leg and put it underneath him to begin the path to his feet. When Emmett does return to his base, Ilia utilizes the rear body lock to keep his weight on his hands and unable to build up further while delivering hard knees. If Ilia were to open his hands to punch from this position, it would be pretty easy for Josh to use that as an opportunity to escape. Ilia sweeps one of Josh's feet out, bringing him back down to the mat. Josh then uses this as an opportunity to create a scramble, attempting a pretty well-timed and executed Granby roll to try and get away. Ilia showcases some good instinctual riding here, allowing Josh to roll out and just kind of surfing to stay on top, knowing when to ease up on the pressure so he doesn't inadvertently follow him into a bad position. He again uses the lock double on the wall to bring Emmett down after he briefly made it to his feet, then utilizing the double leg tuck that Khabib made famous and was dubbed by Conor as the Little Mermaid leg wrap thing. Ilia essentially goes on to ride his opponent out for the rest of the fight and secure the decision victory. In his bout with Max Holloway, whom he would knock out in the second round, he attempted to take the fight to the ground in the first. He again did a great job of turking Max's leg here. This frame clearly shows how Max's path to the feet involves first retracting this leg and putting it underneath his base here, so he can then begin to build up to his feet. The Turk is a great tool to prevent this. However, Ilia abandons this to chase the back, which Max is able to prevent with an overhook, and by keeping his back firmly pressed to the cage. Max is able to build back up to his feet again from here. The end of this round reveals another area for improvement in Ilia's top game. Ilia briefly drops Max with about 15 seconds left. He jumps on Max's back with a rear body lock, but instead of utilizing top pressure to break Max's base down, he puts his right hook in and instead sits to his butt against the cage. This is a pretty novice mistake that you see a lot in amateurs and low to mid-level jiu-jitsu practitioners, where they have the back and they sit to their butt, expecting the opponent to just follow them and also sit. This is in contrast to the smash style of ground and pound, where top pressure is emphasized, even when chasing a submission. You can see here that Max is basically able to remain in his pace, and if time hadn't ran out in the round, there's a good chance that he either reverses the position or escapes from there. In his bout with Charles Oliveira, Oliveira pulls close guard in the first round, immediately vying for head and arm control. Ilia does a great job here of maintaining posture and not falling in any triangle or armbar traps. He follows with a beautiful Toriando style pass into side control and proceeds directly into crucifix position. On the other side, out of view here, Charles manages to pummel his right leg under one of Ilia's, putting him back into a modified half guard, even though his upper body is still pinned. Trikas du Plessis could have taken some notes on this for his recent bout with Hamzat. Charles then manages to off-balance Ilia Topuria staged left here, pummeling that same right leg to the opposite hip and putting Ilia into a backside ashi leg entanglement. Ilia does a good job of keeping weight on that leg and eventually scrambling out, but I can't help but notice the differences in top pressure compared to how Islam did to Charles, completely smothering him. For the final piece of the puzzle, we need to have a look at Ilia's defensive grappling capabilities. Specifically, how well does he fend off takedowns and how does he fare on bottom? At this point in his career, we haven't gotten to see Ilia fight many grappling-heavy opponents outside of Charles Oliveira, who uses a more guard-heavy jiu-jitsu style. The one exception being Bryce Mitchell at featherweight. In his debut against Youssef Zalal, he did get the opportunity to showcase a bit of wall wrestling. Ilia utilized both the split squat and the reverse split squat here on the wall. Both these techniques serve the purpose of not allowing your opponent to get to the lock double, which is probably the best means of taking down your opponent on the wall. The idea is that you separate your legs far enough from each other that your opponent is not able to wrap around them both, at which point he could take your legs out from underneath you. These positions are dynamic though, and your opponent always has other options. Here you can see Ilia using an overhook on one side and actively tracking Youssef's other hand with his own free hand to prevent him from locking his hands around his waist in a body lock or the other leg. At one point, Youssef switches to a single leg, pulling Ilia off the wall. One route you have to a takedown from here is pulling your opponent off the wall with the single leg, and then when they attempt to return to the wall, their legs briefly come together and you can reshoot for a lock double. This appears to be what Youssef is attempting to do as he switches to the double leg here. But Ilia seems to be privy to this, defending the double leg and threatening a front headlock before returning to the split squat. The next match in which we saw Ilia on the defensive was his bout with Bryce Mitchell. Bryce shot several takedowns in the first period, apparently preferring his chances on the ground with Ilia overstriking. Ilia is able to stuff several takedowns by dropping his level and keeping his hips back, and his defensive layers, which are his head and hands, in between them. However, about halfway through the round, Bryce is able to lock up a big snatch single leg, driving Ilia to the wall. Bryce does a good job here of angling Ilia's back and hips off the cage, so he's able to trip Ilia's free leg and dump him in this direction. It's worth noting that Ilia does quickly rebound to his feet, but it still shows some holes in his takedown defense. With just over a minute left in the first round, Bryce takes another single leg, this time sitting Ilia down to that hip, where Bryce will go on to ride Ilia out for the rest of the round, landing some strikes from half guard and guard in the process. It's unclear if Ilia felt that he was winning the round and didn't have much urgency to get back to his feet, or if Bryce's top pressure was just too much for him at that point. But if Bryce Mitchell was able to take him down twice in a round and ride him out, it does raise serious questions about how a potential matchup with Islam Makhachev would have gone. So, wrapping this up, Ilia has some high-level grappling with a takedown-heavy base, and he has shown that he can secure big takedowns at the top of multiple UFC divisions. He also has a pretty sound foundation of submission skills, enough that it is a real threat to his opponents. But there are some holes in his game that make certain matchups interesting for him. What do you think? Could he handle Islam Makhachev's pressure, or is that a nightmare matchup for him? If you enjoyed this breakdown, please do like the video and subscribe for more MMA grappling content.